Hello, 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 and welcome to a quick TLDR rundown of Europa Universalis 5 Dev Diaries number 3 and 4, Trade and Economy and Discovery. As we get closer and closer to the release of Europa Universalis 5 on November 4th, we get more and more info on the various systems and mechanics that will be in the game. In the previous video, I discussed Dev Diaries number 1 and 2, and we continue now until we catch up to the weekly release. These Dev Diaries were very interesting since approaching this game as a Victoria 3 player, there's a lot here that's familiar, and there's plenty that's unique to EU5 and very exciting. So if you're a busy gamer on the go and don't have time to read the full Dev Diaries, here's a quick TLDR rundown of what was discussed. As always, if you want to read the full Dev Diaries, and I highly recommend that you do, a link to them are in the description. Let's dive in. We start off with the most basic element of an economy, the extraction of resources. The map will be filled with natural resources, as you can see in this image here. You will extract those resources with RGOs, resource gathering operations. These RGOs will employ peasants and turn them into laborers, a social class just above peasant. Goods potentials will be distributed around the world based on real-world availability. The resources attached to a location don't change, with some small exceptions. What you as the player have control over is the capacity of the RGOs. This is a current level and a maximum level. We see here a cotton RGO, and here is the current level and the maximum level. This cotton RGO is utilizing all 23 levels. However, just like in Victoria 3, just because you build the additional levels doesn't mean it outputs more if you don't have the laborers to work the RGO. However, unlike Victoria 3, the more population you have in a location, the more maximum levels you can attain. So if you have more pops moved to this location, you can potentially increase the maximum level of this cotton RGO past 23. Locations will also have a development score. The higher the development of a location, the more levels of RGO you can attain. There will be modifiers as well that affect these RGOs. For example, things like war, rebellion, natural disasters, or instability will reduce the productivity of these RGOs. There will also be natural modifiers. In this image here, this location along the Nile has a natural modifier of fertile Nile Delta, which increases the output of rice RGOs by 25%. Locations will also have ranks, which will affect the maximum size of an RGO. As a location moves from being a rural area to a town or city, the maximum levels of RGOs will go down because of the urban expansion. Technology will also affect RGOs. We see here the slitting mills advance in the Age of Reformation. This will increase the output of iron RGOs by 66% in your nation. And speaking of tech, higher literacy will also increase the potential size of your RGOs. And finally, buildings can increase RGO production. For example, the windmill building will increase production in wheat and rice RGOs. In the example here, we have a building that produces the raw material sand by utilizing these two inputs. And this brings us to buildings. Along with RGOs, you can build buildings in locations as well. These buildings can produce goods by utilizing other goods as inputs, or give various other effects. Buildings are categorized into type. Right here, we see a tools guild, whose type is basic industry. The other building types are infrastructure buildings, trade buildings, military buildings, village buildings, cultural buildings, religious buildings, government buildings, and location-specific buildings. One of the biggest changes coming to the game is the mechanic of dynamic markets. A market refers to a market center and the state it's in. This is an image of the market map mode in 1337. You can see each market and the reach it has. A market's reach is determined by two things: your market attraction and your market protectionism. Here's an example of the Genoa market. Each good in a market will have a price that is higher or lower than the base price, determined by the buy and sell orders of the good, much like Victoria 3. Countries will trade out of a market, and each country will have a certain level of trade advantage in that market. The term trade advantage means something a little different here than it does in Victoria 3. A country's trade advantage determines the priority they get when buying and selling goods in a market. In the example with Genoa here, Signoria of Ferrara has the highest trade advantage in the Genoa market, so they get to trade first, then the Papal States, and so on. A country's trade capacity will determine how many goods that country can trade. You can increase your trade advantage by building marketplaces, strengthening maritime presence, or controlling more locations within the market. The reach a market has is determined by its trade range. Trade range is the maximum distance another market's market center can be for the two markets to conduct trade with each other. Markets will compete with each other over locations. The stronger a market is, the farther its reach. The way markets compete with each other for locations is with market attraction and market protection. Market attraction determines how strongly a market can pull surrounding locations into it, and market protection determines how much a market can keep competing markets from taking its locations. In the last video, we talked about societal values, and once you reach the age of Reformation, you will have access to the societal values of mercantilism and free trade, two competing values. Going towards mercantilism strengthens your market protection, but lowers trade efficiency, whereas going towards free trade increases trade efficiency, but lowers trade protection. However, you also need to be mindful of a mechanic called market access. Markets can span large swaths of land and suffer from low market access. The further a location is from the market center, the lower the market access. Low market access will lower the amount of goods available in the location, as well as lower output and diminish the local tax base. In the map here, the darker the shade on the location, the lower the market access. Here you can see the location of Krtovo is very far away from the market center in Pest, and market access is at 46.48%. To counter this, you can build roads, relocate the market center to a new location, or create multiple markets in your country. Your country can also conduct private sector trades, specifically with your burgher class. The burghers will conduct trades of their own, and you can enhance this by granting them the trade monopoly's estate privilege. And this brings us to discovery, also known as colonization. There will be a new geopolitical window in the UI that will be your hub for discovering new land and then subsequently colonizing it. Before you can colonize land, you need to discover it, and every nation will have a colonial range value. The base value will start at 1,000 and can be increased by advances. This measures how far you can send expeditions out to find new land. In the Exploration tab of the new Geopolitics window, you'll see a list of places available to you for exploration. The places available to you are determined by your colonial range and your nearest port. Your nearest port will include ports that are part of your subjects and allies. You will need to pay ducats and use sailors or manpower, depending on if you're exploring by land or by sea. You will also choose a character to lead the expedition from your nation's pool of available characters. Of course, there will be historical characters peppered in, such as Magellan. After you've selected the destination and your character, you'll need to prepare the expedition. This will require resources, as seen here, and won't launch until the required resources are acquired. After you've completed the preparation, the expedition will launch. The time it takes to complete will depend on the distance being traveled compared to your nation's naval range and the terrain being explored. For example, harsh seas or rugged terrain will take longer to overcome. And of course, no Paradox game is complete without events. During the expedition, you will encounter events that will have positive or negative effects. Unlike EU4, you will not have access to the newly discovered land until the expedition has returned home to tell you about it. But once they do, you are now ready for colonization. You will have a value for colonization range, and that range will inform which colonization charters you have available to you. Here we see the colonization charters available to Portugal in 1509. One thing that was stressed in this dev diary is that colonization is a process that will take time. time and money. So don't expect your colonies to become booming centers of commerce a couple years after enacting the charter. After you've established the colonization charter, you then need to get your pops to move there. This is measured by your colonial migration value. This can be increased through tech, laws, government reforms, and having an outward societal value. Having a more outward societal value will increase colonial migration, and having an inward societal value will decrease it. Of course, one of the major benefits of colonization is bringing new materials and resources into your market. You see here a map of RGOs in Brazil. This will be one of the major pulls to engage in colonization. You will see nations go for resource-rich lands first, so starting your exploration and colonization early will be to your benefit, because it will be a race to the goods. In order to complete a colonial charter, you need at least 1,000 pops present in every location covered in the charter. After that, you need at least 36% of those pops to be part of your primary culture or one that is accepted in your nation, and 26% of them to be part of your nation's religion. This is why it is a race between you and other colonizing nations. You need to get your people there in larger numbers. But also, this is why colonizing locations with a large native population will be more difficult, because the large number of natives there will lower your percentage of primary culture and primary religion pops. This also creates another difficulty in that, let's say you win the race to complete a certain charter, but Spain and France were both trying to colonize the same place. You might have won the race and completed the charter and now own that land, but the pops that Spain and France sent there are still there. You will own that land and the colony will belong to you, but you will still have a large number of Spanish and French pops in your colony. Once you complete a colonial charter, you have a decision to make with the new land. You can create a new colonial subject. This will be a semi-autonomous country that governs the territory on your behalf, but has its own market that will feed into yours. You can decide to play as the new subject. As the Dev Diary put it, step into the shoes of your new colony, guiding its growth and carving out a unique destiny separate from its mother country. You can integrate the new land into an existing colonial subject, and lastly, you can retain direct control of the new land, keeping it as part of your core empire. This will require more attention and resources to the land as opposed to creating a colonial subject. Once you start your colony, they will probably be below the 5% population capacity. This will give you access to a new settlement building. Once the population goes above 5% capacity, this building will automatically disappear. You'll need to weigh the pros and the cons of either creating a colonial subject or integrating the land into your empire. Integrating it gives you more control over the resources and output because that land will be subject to all the benefits your laws, reforms, societal values, and everything else that affects RGO output. However, because this land will be so far from your core nation, it will be harder to control. Giving the land to a new colonial subject will alleviate those difficulties of control. However, colonial subjects can have their own cabinet and can enact cabinet actions. However, as an overlord, you can still build buildings and roads in your subject and thus increase their RGO levels. You also get the following from your colonial subjects: 2.5% monthly income from all sources, monthly manpower and sailors to reinforce your armies and fleets, 33% of their trade advantage and trade capacity. A loyal colonial subject will join all offensive and defensive wars of their overlord, and access to actions such as siphon income and press sailors, giving short boosts of ducats and sailors. So you have some decisions to make once you win the race for the charter. Any nation in EU5 can colonize, not just the European ones, but there will be an option to limit colonization to any European powers if you want more historical immersion. This sounds like it's going to be a lot of fun with a lot of complexity and varied results from run to run. I'm very excited to try this out and maybe, possibly, continue playing as a certain colony. If you haven't done so, please consider giving the video a like and the channel a subscribe. Every time you do, another random island in the Atlantic is mistakenly called India. I'd like to thank the members of the channel for helping to keep things going. That's it for now. As always, be awesome.